Hello, everybody. My name is Patricia Singletary. I am the Preservation Grants Manager. You're joining us today to see our webinar, the category Deep Dive on Capital Projects and Project Planning for the Nuestra Herencia Grant Program. We're joined by Cinco Rios Multilingual Initiatives. Our agenda for today's webinar is we're going to introduce Latinos and Heritage Conservation and our staff. We'll begin that right now by introducing the folks on our call. As you all heard, my name is Patricia, and I am the Preservation Grants Manager. Hillary?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hilary Morales Robles, and I am the Historic Preservation Officer.
Hello, everyone. I am Seila Mota Casper, Executive Director of Latinos and Heritage Conservation. Bienvenidos.
Now, if you are joining us today, you likely already know about Latinos and Heritage Conservation. Maybe you've already attended one of our webinars, and if so, thank you. But if you don't, Latinos and Heritage Conservation is the leading nonprofit dedicated to preserving Latinx places, stories, and cultural heritage across the United States. Our mission is to build a movement that affirms Latinx heritage through education, conservation, and leadership development. Our vision is a just world that values Latinx heritage, people, and places. Before we continue with the presentation, I would like to make a brief note about why LHC uses the term Latinx. Our organization has embraced Latinx as a gender-inclusive way to refer to people of Latin American descent. But we understand that Latinx identity is complex and diverse. People use a wide variety of labels. So whether you use Latino, Latina, Hispanic, Chicano, Tejano, or any other label that identifies your culture and ethnicity, we are here to serve you. You do not need to use Latinx in order to apply to the grant program or to engage with LHC. Language is fluid and ever-changing, and we do not pretend to be the ultimate authority on this matter. Thank you for allowing me to speak on that, and we are always open to feedback from our community. So now that you've learned about LHC, let's review what the Nuestra Herencia Grant Program is. Nuestra Herencia is the nation's first grant program dedicated to funding Latinx heritage projects. We have $600,000 in annual funding available, and the program's goal is to empower grassroots Latinx-focused nonprofit organizations and community groups to protect and celebrate Latinx heritage. Nuestra Herencia is made possible by the generous support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation in partnership with the Social Impact Fund. The Mellon Foundation has donated $1.8 million to the program for over 3 years. So, big thanks to them. Before we continue, I want to take a second to define what heritage means. It's a word I've already said a lot and will continue to say a lot throughout this webinar. The definition of heritage is features belonging to the culture of a particular society, such as tradition, languages, or buildings, that were created in the past and still have historical importance. When it comes to the Latinx community, our heritage is a repository of traditions, values, and cultural practices. It serves as a collective memory. And this program was created to fund projects that conserve or preserve our heritage. Let's also talk about the definition of historic preservation. LHC defines historic preservation as a diverse discipline committed to recognizing and safeguarding culture and history. Traditionally, it involves protecting historic buildings, archaeology, public lands, the environment, artifacts, and cultural traditions that are significant in our shared history. But at its core, historic preservation honors and sustains elements that shape our cultural identity. This Nuestra Herencia is a historic preservation and heritage-focused grant. So it is very important to keep these definitions in mind as you write your application. There is a glossary available on our website that includes other important terms. To be eligible for this grant, meaning that you can apply and be considered for funding, the organization you apply on behalf of must be a 501c3 nonprofit or fiscally sponsored, and you must be Latinx-led and or serve Latinx communities. In our previous webinars, we've given an overview of the Nuestra Herencia Grant Program and gone into detail about the guidelines. We've also covered the basics of grant writing that dive into the Nuestra Herencia application and rubric. Today, we are going to talk about 2 of our 4 project categories. Our project categories are what you apply to. You can only apply to one category, so you want to make sure you pick the right one. Our deep dive today will be focused on capital projects and project planning. That is why I have our wonderful historic preservation officer here who's going to get us started. Hillary?
Hello, everyone. To help you visualize the differences and relationship between capital projects and project planning categories, here's an analogy comparing a preservation project with a taco. This is very LEC coded. The goal of Nuestra Herencia Grant Program is to support preservation projects at all stages of their life cycle. Think of a preservation project like making tacos to share with your family and friends. Yes, yum. The tacos represent the final product, a completed preservation project. So, how do the stages of taco making process relate to historic preservation? The project planning can be considered the prepping stage. Project planning is like prepping your ingredients. You write down the recipe, list all the ingredients you need, and plan your steps. For preservation projects, this stage includes creating architectural plans, gathering research, and preparing grant applications or heritage nominations. It is all about setting yourself up for success. In terms of the capital projects, it is considered the execution stage. With your ingredients ready, it is time to cook. Capital projects are the actual work of restoring or adapting a historic site or building. For tacos, this means cooking and assembling the food. For preservation, it involves stabilizing a structure, restoring buildings, or improving accessibility. This is where the vision comes to life. Next slide, please. So what is a capital project? A capital project in heritage conservation, it is a large-scale, long-term commitment initiative focused on protecting, restoring, or adapting historic buildings, sites, or landscapes. Some of the examples that we provide today are structural stabilization, restoration and renovations, adaptive reuse, which is the process of repurposing existing buildings for new uses, improving accessibility, which means ensuring that historic buildings can be safe and comfortably used or experienced by people of all abilities, or preserving abandoned cemeteries. The capital projects category provides funding in the range of $50,000 up to $100,000 for the physical preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation of significant Latinx historic and cultural sites. The site cannot be privately owned property that does not serve the public, like a historic house that is used solely as a private residence. I think what someone will ask me how to make this application successful. A successful capital project demonstrates readiness, a clear scope, a long-term commitment to preservation. Strong applications clearly explain the site's significance and include comprehensive planning documents such as preservation restoration specifications, construction drawings, and project timelines. In terms of budgets, it should be including detail and be realistic, including breakdown of cost, phasing, contingencies, and a $5,000 allocation on ongoing maintenance. This shows to us long-term stewardship for future generations. A capital project funding is best suited for organizations that already have a construction or preservation plan and are prepared to implement it with necessary documentation, like architectural engineering plans, permits, code reviews, and detailed specifications. In simple words, to summarize this category is capital project succeeds when it's well planned, well budgeted, and built for long-term care. Next slide, please. In terms of supporting materials, we highly recommend, including photo documentation as support materials. Photos provide visual evidence of current conditions, highlight areas that need work, and strengthen the clarity and impact of your grant proposal. And now I'll be sharing next to Sheila Mota-Casper.
Thank you, Hillary. Before we begin, we wanted to share what the Secretary of the Interior standards are, and this is for the treatment of historic properties. The standards, as we call them, outline particular principles and guidelines for maintaining, repairing, and replacing historic materials, as well as designing compatible additions or alterations to your historic site. These guidelines set out and translate these principles into practice by creating recommendations and guidelines for you to actually utilize in your rehabilitation project. And it stems from our National Historic Preservation Act, which was enacted in 1966. And it has evolved over time from the 70s, from it expanding to have formal guidelines in these for use of grants, HUD programs, and federal historic tax incentives. There's also been major revisions over time, and now we are excited to share that updates include sustainability, new materials, and climate resistance. So these standards remain as the guidelines. They are our Northern Star that help tell us exactly how we should be rehabilitating or adapting a historic building. And because it comes from the national level, these are guidelines that are overseen by, most importantly, your city government there through where you live to help tell you exactly how to rehabilitate, what should and should not be done. Next slide, please. One of the things that we also want to share is that on the guidelines, it is on the matrix. So you can see that it's part of your scoring process. One thing that we wanted to note is that, what exactly is historic designations? The first thing I want to share is that you do not need to be historically designated at the local, state, or federal level. So if we ask you on the application, is your site historically designated? It is absolutely okay to check no. And we know that because most Latinx historic sites are not federally designated. We as Latinos in our historic sites only make up 1% of sites listed in the National Register of Historic Places. But to begin, what are historic designations? Well, historic designations are officially recognized properties, buildings, historic districts that have historic architectural and cultural significance to you and your communities. We've broken it down here to show you that there can be historic designations with local city governments where you live, your state historic preservation office, which each state has, and federal governments such as the National Park Service. So, next slide, please. And why is this important for capital projects and why we're bringing it up if you don't have to be designated? That's because if your site is designated, that is a consideration that you, as the project manager, and us, as historic preservationists and preservation architects, will be helping to guide you because at the local level, if you are designated, there may be some permits that need to take place that ahead of you actually beginning your rehabilitation project that will be funded through this grant program.
I'm going to leave this on the screen for a second as folks maybe send in some questions. We did already have one question about if your site needs to be historically designated. Just answered, sure don't. And when speaking about the Secretary's standards, there is a specific question in the application if you are applying to capital projects where you need to answer how you will meet those guidelines. So that's why we include information about it here. Please put questions in the question and answer if you have them. We do have one question about can the application fund two place-based locations but serving the same community? I think this is one I would have to know more about, so I will put my email in the chat because I'm happy to take more personal directed questions about your specific projects.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind is that we have funded projects previously that had multifacets to it, but it was under one umbrella project. A good example is doing a survey for a historic context study or historical markers that go up. That's one project, multiple sites.
Mhm. And that really brings us well into our next section, our other category, project planning. Hillary?
Hello again. So, project planning in historic preservation involves developing the necessary strategies, documents, and resources to ensure the successful preservation, restoration, or adaptive reuse of historic sites and structures. Some examples are architectural engineering plans, feasibility studies, building condition and environmental site assessments, or like Sayla mentioned, a survey. Next slide. Yes. Project planning provides funding in the range of $10,000 up to $40,000 for the development of essential planning, technical, and preservation documents needed for successful historic preservation or site identification projects. Next slide. What it will be a strong application for under this category? A strong application under project planning clearly defines preservation goals, demonstrate expert guidance, and shows how planning activities will inform future capital projects. Applicants must include an architect or historic preservation professional on the project team. This can be a consultant, a staff member with professional expertise, or a volunteer. Their expertise should be reflected in your proposal. In simple terms, a project planning proposal is the foundation for successful preservation. Next slide, please. As a lover of diagrams, because I'm a visual learner and with visual memory, here's a quick way to visualize what a project planning involves. So let's walk through how project planning leads to successful preservation outcomes. We start at the top with the planning of review. This is where we define our preservation goals and identify the areas that need attention. Think of this as setting a clear direction for everything that follows. Next, you need to identify who is your team, the team and expertise. A strong project team includes an architect or historic preservation professional. The technical guidance ensures that every decision is informed and that we follow best practices in historic preservation. Then we need to identify what are the planning activities that this team will practice. Here, the team will conduct things such as research, site assessments, and documents the condition of the property. Based on that work, we develop strategies and recommendations to address the site needs. Next, the activities feed directly of what the future capital project will look like. Planning helps us prioritize what needs work and shapes the project scope and budget. So we know exactly what to tackle and how to do it effectively. And finally, all this work leads to the preservation outcome, or it will be ready for a capital project. Yay. By planning carefully, we protect the historic and cultural significance of a site and maximize the impact and sustainability of our efforts.
Thank you so much, Hillary. So, as she just covered, a big portion and part of the purpose of the project planning category is to be a feeder for capital projects. This way, if there's an organization that knows of a building or a site that needs restoration, but you don't have that engineering plan yet, or you don't have an architect yet that's told you what has to happen, then you could apply to project planning and get ready for that next step. This category, though, is also written rather broad. There are other things that can fit into this category that are different preservation outcomes, as Hillary just covered. Some examples include if the project you are planning is focused on finding and identifying places in an area that are related to Latinx history. Maybe you're looking for these places for a future capital project restoration situation. Or maybe you're trying to find out where you want to put historic markers in your city. Then grants in the project planning category can help support things like a cultural resource or historic context survey that would help you gather the documentation and research you need to do a site identification project like that. Site identification just means finding out what places have ties to Latinx history in your area. Now, speaking of documentation and research, as Selah mentioned earlier, historic designations are an important part of the Latinx preservation movement. It is one of our key funding goals to support organizations looking to nominate sites to local, state, or national registries. We will actually have a whole nother webinar on this topic 1 week from today, so please come back for that. And I bring that up here because project planning can support the hiring of a consultant that can help you with that nomination process. So you can apply to project planning if you want to pursue historic designation for a site. And finally, since this category is all about planning, it can also support hiring a consultant that will help develop an emergency plan for your historic site. Latinx historic places often face greater climate risk simply because they haven't received resources or support that they've needed for decades. While emergency planning can feel like one more thing that needs attention and funding on top of everything else, events like the Los Angeles fires or Hurricane Helene in North Carolina can show just how quickly things can change. Preparing now helps protect our staff, our volunteers, and the places that hold our stories and heritage. In just a second, I'll put some links for emergency planning resources in the chat. But since here we're talking a whole lot about consultants and contractors and needing those people, and if you need a consultant or contractor as part of your project, you will need to create a request for proposal. Selah is going to explain how to do that.
Hi, everyone. So, what is a request for proposal? A request for proposal is a business document that announces a project, it describes it, and it solicits bids from qualified contractors. In your RFP, request for proposal, you will outline the project scope, its objectives, requirements, timeline, and evaluation criteria that you will be using, and really provide clear guidance for how proposals should be prepared. RFPs are typically used for complex projects involving multiple tasks or partners, ensuring that there is transparency, that you're receiving competitive bids, and that you have an equitable selection process. For instance, you may have a capital project to change a roof, and for that roof, you may have 3 or 4 subcontractors. In that scenario, getting an RFP is in your best interest, so that way one contractor is overseeing every single aspect of the project. And through this RFP, you will outline exactly what is needed for your project scope of work. So after the proposals are submitted, your organization will evaluate each bidder. Like, is it feasible? Can they do this work? Do they have or do you have the financial capacity to take on this project with this submitter? Do they have technical expertise to do the work? And overall, just really help score your overall value for awarding the contract. So how do you find a contractor and consultant? This is often a question that we get. It's a really great question. One thing that you can do is once you define the project needs and issues, you're going to create this RFP. You're going to distribute it widely via email, email to partners, like through your listserv, newsletters, website associations, social media. You can also post it on places like LinkedIn or other professional spaces that you know of. One thing that we often recommend is to host a webinar like we are today. In this webinar, you will provide information and give time and space for Q&A. Then you'll score the proposals using your own rubric. We have plenty of examples to share with you on this. But the biggest thing that we want to make sure is that you are really looking through their qualifications thoroughly. Review their portfolios. Check out and see if they have past preservation experience. That's a really big one because these dollars have to abide by the standards as we spoke earlier. That's probably one of the biggest issues that we see is that individuals hire folks that don't understand what historic preservation is, what these standards and guidelines are at the local, state, or federal level. Also, check references. This is big, you all. Check your references. Check their certifications. Are they certified? Do they have insurance coverage and capacity to meet the deadlines by the grant deadline date or your project deadline date? The biggest issues and common pitfalls that we see is typically partners will select the lowest bidder. As an executive director of a nonprofit, I get that. I am always looking at cents and dollars and making sure that we are being responsible with every resource that we have. However, it's the biggest pitfall because in selecting the cheapest option, it may not be your best option. And I'll give you an example. Last week, I had an emergency phone call from a partner at 7 p.m. because an individual that they hired through another grant, not LHC's grant, however, did not seek permitting and did not abide by local guidelines. So, in this panic call, they said, "What should I do? We accidentally hired this individual. They are not insured. They did not seek permitting and they did not go by local guidelines." And as we started speaking through and started talking as to why this project manager, the local partner, and why the nonprofit selected this person, it was because it was the cheapest option. Well, as a preservationist and someone who has done dozens and dozens of restoration projects, I know how to look at a bid and be like, okay, this is a one person, one man show. They do not have the capacity to do this project in 2 months. Are they subcontracting? Great. Then let's look at that. And that's where the RFP will help guide you. Um, so the other thing is, and like in this case, is that the project remained unfinished because at that point, that contractor was asked to step away so that way these dollars would no longer be used, and in this case, in a not so responsible manner. So they asked him to go off of the project. They did not make the timeline for the grant because now they're having to work with the city and having to ask for a grant extension. These things happen every single day, but an RFP will ensure that you are not put in this situation. And of course, Latinos and Heritage Conservation has historic preservationists on hand, like myself, and preservation architects like Hillary, who are here to help and guide you.
Thank you so much, Sayla. That was great. I also want to note we've reviewed this in our grant program overview webinar and basics of grant writing. But if you do need a contractor consultant, it is a requirement in the support materials in the application to include an RFP. That is why learning about this is so important. We need to see the RFP, even if you don't have the bids yet. Having the bids, having some options to show us, that may make your application more competitive because it shows us that you are ready to go. It shows that you know who's going to do the work and that the project will be successful in the timeline you lay out. But all that is required is that request for proposal. We also have a quick question in the chat, which is about matching funds. Matching funds are not required for the Nuestra Herencia grant. If your project costs more than what we can provide, and for capital projects, the max is 100,000, then we'll need to see in your budget how you make up that because we want to fund projects that can reach completion. But matching funds and cost sharing are not required. Now we're going to talk about historic significance and cultural significance, a big part of our rubric. Here you go, Hillary.
Yes. This is essentially the core of all the work that we do at LEC. I think a good way to look at this is with a question is why is this site an important representation of Latinx heritage? When we talk about historical and cultural significance of a site, a building and a landscape, we are asking why this place matters and what it represents for the community. So first, there's a historical value. This is about the site's connection to local, regional, or even national history, like Selah previously mentioned about historical designation. This can be related to the history of a person that is important in the community. It can be about a place of remembrance of a social movement, like the Chicano movement, for example, or even important events that like the civil wars or similar historical events that are tied to a collective sense of memory of our Latino history in the US. Next, we can look at the cultural relevance. The sites reflects the identity, traditions, and heritage of the community. How this can be how people live, work, celebrated, and build their lives, like historic barrios, for example. For Latinx heritage, this can include architecture, public spaces, markets, social organizations, or community practices that tell a story often overlooked in broader historical narratives. Lastly, I think what is important about highlighting historical and cultural significance in your narrative and proposal is that it supports the justification for its preservation. Understanding a site's historical and cultural significance helps us explain why funding is needed. It is just not just about fixing a building, it is about protecting the stories, the memories, and the identity that this place embodies for future generations. Next slide.
Really fast, before we move on, you mentioned cultural relevance. Selah, could you expand on the importance of that in our work and how it relates to the typical 50-year guidance?
Absolutely. So we are very interested in the cultural relevance of the sites that are most important to you and your community. As Hillary said, if it is a site that you all identify with, we want to know what it is. We want to help support that project. Cultural significance is often overlooked in the practice of historic preservation. But we at Latinos and Heritage Conservation, we embrace Latinidad. We lead with Latinidad. We want to know why that site is so culturally significant to you and your community. One thing that is to note as well is that it does not have to be 50 years or older. Again, your site does not have to be historically designated, which typically has to meet a 50-year rule mark. So it can be 20 years old. It can be a community center that had significant conversations that were had inside. If it is important to you, it is important to us. So in your application, we want to know what the cultural relevance is to this. And even if it's not a historically 150-year-old building, if it is something that is important to you all and your community, then we want to help preserve it.
So this is a wrap up for both categories. As we said at the beginning with the taco analogy, so the project planning is essentially the prepping stage. You're gonna prepare the work, the research, and the assessments that needs to take place before it's ready for a capital project. And the capital project is the execution phase, where the actual restoration or rehabilitation happens. It is when we are shovel ready. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Hillary. So, quick review of what we do not fund with Nuestra Herencia grant funds. I pulled this from our larger list that is available on our website. These are what relate most specifically to these two categories. We cannot fund the preservation of private or commercial property, like Hillary mentioned earlier, with a historic house that is only being used as a private residence. We cannot fund the total or complete demolition of a historic building, the acquisition of new property. So if you don't own the property that you want to restore, unfortunately, we cannot fund the purchasing of it. We cannot fund new construction, mortgages, or taxes. As I mentioned, full list is available on the website. We have a few more webinars this series. One is a week from today, the importance of historic designations. We will be going into detail about what is a historic designation, how to nominate a site. We will once again be joined by Selah, our executive director, along with a past Latinos in Heritage fellow, Allison Soto Morales, who will be talking about LHC's equity study. I'm not sure if we mentioned it here, but less than 1% of sites on the National Register of Historic Places represent Latinx history. So that's why it is so important to us to increase that number. See, our other webinar will be on our other two project categories, building organizational strength and community interpretation and engagement. And then in January, we will be focusing on grant management with the After the Award webinar. That will talk about a little bit what happens if you get the money. It's good to know what the next step is. Also, this week is my first office hour session. This office hours is with me, and Hillary will be joining me in case there are any capital project type questions that are fitting of an architect and historic preservationist. You do have to register to attend office hours. They will be held via Zoom. I will put the link in the chat in just a moment. And please note that if you attend this session, any question you ask will be heard by anyone else attending the session. If you have something more private to deal with, please email me directly. I've put my email in the chat. I also want to talk about a few other opportunities that LHC has coming up. So in 2026, the wonderful spring, our new programming will be unveiled. We're excited to give you a sneak peek at two major initiatives. First, we will be launching the second cycle of the Endangered Latinx Landmarks program. Hillary is the manager of this program. And if you know of a site that is at risk that needs support to raise awareness and advocate for preservation, then this is your opportunity to make a difference. We also currently have open the call for proposals to speak at our August 2026 Congreso Leadership Summit in Chicago. I will also put that link in the chat. It is actually the same place where you submit your application. It's on Submittable. If you have ideas for a session you would like to lead or a presentation, then we want to hear from you. Selah is now going to tell us all a little bit about how you all can support us if you feel so inclined.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this webinar. We are so happy to have you here. Today is Giving Tuesday, and if you're on this call, you are a nonprofit and you know how important today is. So happy Giving Tuesday, and thank you for this work. One way that you can support us is become a member. You can join our membership. We have memberships that are available here. Through memberships, you can go ahead and participate in exclusive things like monthly cafecitos. We have quarterly members newsletters. And then we also provide access and discounts to LHC events like Congreso, which will be in Chicago, and offer a space for networking and growth for leadership development via our online forum called La Plaza. And here's where you can join. We hope that you will join our movement. Next slide, please. And also, as the executive director of Latinos and Heritage Conservation, I want to invite you to help support our work in Latinx heritage and everything that's ahead of us to help save Nuestra Historia. This year, we were able to document 13 Latinx sites through our Endangered Latinx Landmarks program. We also launched this wonderful and incredible grant program, Nuestra Herencia, and were able to award 14 grantees this past year. We completed 7 oral histories and 5 new entries to be added into our National Abuelas Project database. We paid 3 graduate fellows to help join us and provided them with leadership development in the field to learn about Latinx preservation work. We're also excited to share that over and nearly 200 stories of your great work through the grants program, through our Endangered Latinx Landmarks program, were shared with organizations, were shared with media nationwide. We cannot do this work without you. So if you can give $5, $10, $25, we invite you to support us and join our movement and help us to continue doing this work, re-granting all of these important sites that need so much support, especially today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selah. We have come to the end of our presentation. I do not currently see any questions, but please feel free to throw them in there. We'll stay on for a second. But thank you so much. I've placed the links for our upcoming webinars and the office hours in the chat. I will put my email up on the screen. Nope, wrong email. That's okay. I'll put it in the chat. If you email the info email, it will still get to me. So I'll leave it up here. Any final thoughts from our panelists, Hillary and Selah?
I will just say that this is our second year doing grants. We want you to know that we love reading your applications. We are inspired by your work. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you're doing to help preserve and save Latinx heritage. We're excited to help support you. So please do not be afraid to reach out to Patricia, Hillary, or myself. We are here to support you, whether it's through this grant program or separate of it. We want to see you succeed and we want to help support all of the work that you're doing.
I align directly with Selah in everything that she said. I think that this program is a dream come true for so many communities. This never existed, and we're so blessed and grateful to be there for you. We've been the other side too, so we get it. So yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We are here for you. We're building a movement together, and we hope that you see your applications.
Thank you, everybody. I don't see any questions, or the ones that I did, I went ahead and answered. You all have my email. Hope to see you all soon. And thank you so much to Cinco Rios, our wonderful interpreters. Okay. Bye, everybody.